Okay, so you know how everyone's always searching for that secret to happiness?
Mhm.
Like real lasting happiness, not just a quick hit of, oh, I'm happy for a minute.
Right, it's like the holy grail, isn't it? Everyone wants it, but figuring out how to actually get it, that's the tricky part.
Totally. And there's so much noise out there. It's like every other day there's a new self-help book or guru promising the answer.
And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're really digging into Gad Saad's book, The Saad Truth About Happiness. Specifically today, we're focusing on chapters 1 through 4. And trust me, this isn't your typical self-help stuff.
Definitely not. Because Saad, he
Yeah.
comes at this whole happiness thing from a totally different angle. We're talking evolutionary behavioral scientist. This is someone who brings some serious science to the table.
Exactly. And you know what else really struck me about his approach? He actually explains why those typical self-help promises often fall flat. It's fascinating.
See, that's what I love about it. It's not just do this and you'll be happy. It's like, here's the science behind it. But here's the thing. By all accounts, Gad Saad, he's a genuinely happy guy. People meet him, they're like, wow, this guy just radiates happiness. Like Glenn Beck even said something about how being around Saad makes him think of happiness. And that's not exactly what you usually hear about academics.
Okay, yeah, that is kind of hilarious when you think about it. It's like he's broken the mold or something. But you hit on a really important point. It isn't just about genetics, right? It's not like he was just born with this magical happiness gene. Saad talks a lot about this idea that happiness is something you cultivate, that it's influenced by the choices you make, the mindset you adopt. There's even a tweet he mentions where someone called him a master of enjoying life.
Okay, that's amazing. A master of enjoying life. I love that.
Right. It totally goes to show you no matter who you are or where you're starting from, there are things you can do to nudge yourself towards a happier, more fulfilling life.
Totally. It's a skill, not just something you're stuck with, which I love. And speaking of skills, chapter 2, it's like taking us back to school, ancient Greek philosophy school, to be exact. I love that Sazad makes these connections between ancient wisdom and modern research.
Isn't it fascinating? Like when you think about how long people have been grappling with this whole happiness thing, it totally puts things in perspective, you
There's
know?
like this timeless pursuit.
Right. And with the ancient Greeks, it's so interesting how their thinking evolved. Early on, they believed happiness was completely determined by the gods, like fate had already decided if you were going to be happy or not. But then you have these other thinkers, like Aristotle and Plato, who come along and completely flip the script. They're like, hold on a second. We actually have the power to shape our own happiness.
Whoa, that's a big shift. It reminds me, I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was telling me all about how much Stoic philosophy has helped him find more happiness. You heard about that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's all about focusing on what you can control and accepting what you can't, which actually seems to line up with that whole ancient Greek idea of agency, right?
Totally. It's all connected.
But before we get too philosophical here,
Bringing us back down to earth with some hard science, right? Always love it.
we'll get this, and this is something that really surprised me. So happiness, it's not just about feeling good, right? Turns out it has a huge impact on our physical health.
You know, it's funny because we intuitively get that if we're not feeling well, it can really bring us down, right? But the flip side, the idea that being happier can actually make us healthier, that's pretty powerful.
Right. And there's actual science behind it. Happier people tend to make healthier choices. They work out more. They eat better. I mean, it's like our bodies are literally on board with us being happy.
I love that. Your body's like, yeah, let's do this happy thing. It's good for everybody.
Exactly. Okay, but now let's talk about another biggie that I think everyone's curious about. Money. Does money actually buy happiness? I mean, think about it. We were just watching that documentary on the narco wars
Mhm.
and those cartel leaders,
Yeah.
right? They had unbelievable wealth and power, and yet they ended up hiding, living in fear. So did all that money really buy them lasting happiness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something that has fascinated economists for decades. There's this whole thing called the Easterlin Paradox, which basically says that while wealthier individuals tend to be happier, wealthier nations aren't always happier.
Wow, that is a paradox. So what's the deal there? Is there like a limit on how much happiness money can buy?
Yeah, some studies suggest there's a kind of happiness plateau, right? And they even put a number on it, something like $75,000 per year. Like, once you hit that magic number, having more money doesn't necessarily translate into significantly more happiness.
Interesting. So after a certain point, it's almost like diminishing returns on happiness.
Exactly. And even that figure is debated, but it definitely gets you thinking, right?
Totally. Think about those lottery winners, winning big. Sure, it solves financial worries, but it doesn't magically unlock lasting happiness.
You got it. And that's actually a perfect example of what Saad's talking about. Because true happiness, it usually comes from earned achievements, from the effort we put into building a meaningful life. It goes back to that agency we were talking about. You are the architect of your own happiness, not some random lottery drawing.
So money can buy you a lot of things, but not necessarily lasting happiness.
Yeah.
So what does make a difference then? What are those key ingredients? Well, Saad, he really dives into two biggies, two huge life decisions that have a massive impact on our happiness, choosing the right partner and finding the right job.
It's like, duh, right. When you really think about it, where do we spend most of our lives? It's in those two arenas. So if either one of those is a source of stress or unhappiness, it's going to be tough to feel truly content.
Yeah, it's like that saying, love and work, work and love, that's all there is.
Exactly. And Saad actually mentions, he says he wakes up happy every day because of his wife and because of the work ahead of him.
Oh, I love that.
Right. Talk about a recipe for a good day. Okay, so first up, choosing a life partner. And oh my gosh, can we please just ditch the one myth? Like, can we finally put that to rest?
Yes, please. Like, I'm so over it.
I'm with you. It sets people up for so much disappointment. It's like this idea that life is just magically going to fall into place once you find that one perfect person.
Yeah, as if such thing exists.
Yeah.
Like a checklist, and once you've ticked every box, boom, you're done. Happily ever after.
Yeah, it's way more nuanced than that. It takes work. It takes effort. And, Saad, he talks about choosing a partner as get this, a multi-attribute compensatory process.
Okay, hold on. That sounds a little intense. What does that even mean?
Okay, yeah, I know it sounds super technical, but basically what it boils down to is you don't have to be perfect in every single way to attract a great partner.
Okay, phew. That's good to hear.
Right, like, come on, nobody's perfect. We all have our strengths, we've got our weaknesses. The key is finding someone who complements you, whose strengths kind of balance out those areas where maybe you're not so strong. It's like building a team, you know?
Ooh, I like that. It's like you're assembling your own personal dream team.
Exactly. 2 people, not 20.
Right. Okay, that makes so much more sense than trying to find someone who checks off a million boxes on some mythical perfect partner list.
And speaking of lists, remember that anecdote Saad tells about the really wealthy family that was looking for a potential spouse for their child, and all they cared about was the person's profession?
Oh, yeah. It was like status was the only thing that mattered, and they were totally overlooking things like shared values.
Exactly. Shared values. That's huge. Like, who cares if someone looks good on paper if you don't want the same things out of life?
So true. It's about shared dreams, goals, all of that.
100%. And here's another thing that I thought was really insightful. It's not just about who you match with now, it's about how you're going to grow together over time because people change.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, we're not the same people we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right. And Saad uses this concept, it's called mating value, which sounds kind of clinical, but it basically refers to the overall desirability of a person as a partner.
Okay, so how does mating value play into long-term happiness?
Well, think about it. Imagine a couple where one person's mating value, maybe in terms of their career or their personal growth, it increases significantly, while the other person's either stays the same or maybe even declines. That can create some real tension in a relationship.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're on these separate escalators going in different directions. Someone's going up, someone's going down, and that's going to create some friction.
Totally. And it's often not anyone's fault, right? Like, life happens. People change. People evolve at different paces. But I think recognizing that dynamic is really important for long-term happiness.
Totally. So basically, choosing a partner is not just about who you click with today. It's about who you'll continue to grow with, for years to come.
Yeah, like, can you see yourself with this person 10, 20 years down the line? Are they going to challenge you, support you, evolve alongside you? It's a lot to consider.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears for a sec, because the other big one that Saad talks about is finding the right job, which in today's world, it feels more and more relevant, right?
Totally. And he doesn't shy away from the tough stuff here. Like, he even talks about the link between unemployment and suicide rates, which is a sobering reminder of how much our work can impact our mental health.
Right. It's a huge part of our lives. It's easy to take for granted the purpose and structure that a job provides. Even if it's not our dream job, it still gives us a sense of routine, a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely. And, he actually challenges that stereotype of professors having it easy.
Oh, yeah. He's like, don't believe everything you see on TV.
Totally. Like, he uses his own experience as an example. It's not just about the hours you put in.
Right. It's about what those hours consist of, what you're actually doing with that time.
Exactly. It's about the freedom, the variety, the intellectual stimulation, all of that. And he talks about this vitamin model of job characteristics. It's like some aspects of work are beneficial up to a point, but then you need to find that sweet spot.
Okay, so it's not just about finding any job. It's about finding work that aligns with, your values, your interests, what you're naturally good at.
Exactly. We all need to feel challenged and engaged.
Right, not just going through the motions, dreading Monday morning every week.
Yeah, nobody needs that in their life. It's about finding that sweet spot. It's about feeling like your work has meaning, that you're making a contribution, which I think ultimately leads to greater happiness and fulfillment.
Absolutely. It's about finding that work-life balance. And speaking of balance, isn't that where the whole moderation thing comes in? Like, even with a great job, it can still become a source of stress if we let it consume us.
Right.
And that's where Saad takes us in chapter 4, which I got to say, this one really blew my mind. He introduces this idea of the inverted U curve. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It basically shows how too much or too little of, well, pretty much anything can actually be a bad thing.
It's so true. Like, it's the simple little curve, but it illustrates this universal truth. We see it everywhere, in nature, in psychology, in economics, even in the way our own brains function.
Yeah.
Too much stress, we freeze up.
Yeah.
Too little stress, we get complacent. Right.
Totally. So it's about finding that sweet spot, that middle ground, that place where things are, like, just right. But, okay, how does that actually play out in our everyday lives?
Well, take something like perfectionism, right? A little bit of perfectionism. It can be a good thing. It can push us to do our best work. But too much. It can be totally paralyzing. We get so caught up in the details that we never actually finish anything.
Oh my gosh, that is so me. It's like I'll spend hours trying to write the perfect email, and then I'll chicken out and never even send it.
Right, you're like, it's not quite right. I'll send it. Never.
Exactly. Talk about counterproductive.
Right. And that's the thing about this whole inverted U-curve idea. It really highlights how important balance is in everything we do. Even something like exercise, which we know is good for us, right? But even exercise, if you push too hard, you can get injured. You can burn out. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
It's like that old saying, everything in moderation.
Right.
But, the thing with Saad is he doesn't just throw out these cliches. He actually backs it up with science. Like, he even connects this whole inverted U-curve idea to ancient philosophy. He talks about Aristotle's concept of the golden mean, which is all about finding that virtuous middle ground.
Yeah, and it's not just Western philosophy either, right? Think about Buddhist teachings on the middle way, this idea of avoiding extremes. It's like this universal wisdom that's been around for centuries.
It's like a universal truth bomb. But okay, let's get practical here. Let's say we're totally on board with this whole moderation is key thing. What does that actually look like in real life?
I think it starts with being mindful of our own tendencies. Like, are you someone who tends to overwork themselves? Maybe it's about consciously carving out more time for relaxation, for hobbies, for relationships.
Yeah, or if you're like a total people pleaser, maybe it's about setting some healthier boundaries, about learning to say no and prioritizing your own needs without feeling guilty.
Exactly. It's about recognizing where our natural inclinations might be pushing us toward one extreme or the other, and then, consciously making an effort to course correct. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Like, it's almost like we have this internal compass, and the goal isn't to be perfectly balanced all the time, but to just be aware of when we've veered too far off course in one direction or the other.
Yeah, and it's a constant process.
Right.
Life happens, our priorities change, we evolve as individuals. So the key is to stay flexible, to be adaptable, to be open to, reevaluating what brings us happiness and fulfillment.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new framework for even thinking about happiness, and it's not about finding that magic formula. It's really about making conscious choices every day that align with this idea of moderation, balance, finding that golden mean.
Right, and remember what we talked about at the beginning. This is empowering because we have the agency to shape our own experience of happiness. It's not about waiting for it to just magically happen. It's about understanding these principles and then applying them in a way that makes sense for our own lives.
So no more chasing those quick fix solutions.
Yeah.
No more waiting for happiness to just fall into our laps. It's about those small, intentional choices that we make every single day that can move us closer to that, sweet spot, to that place of genuine
Yeah.
contentment.
Yes, exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
I just said it better myself. This has been an amazing deep dive into Gad Saad's The Saad Truth About Happiness. A huge thank you to Dr. Saad for giving us so much to think about. And to you listening, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you most about this conversation? What area of your life could benefit from, maybe a little more moderation or a shift toward that golden mean? Hit us up on social media and let us know. Until next time, keep diving deep.